be your notes for lesson 3.3, so make sure you're labeling that. Lesson 3.3, multiplying rational numbers. Remember what a rational number is. Any number that can be written in the form of a fraction is a rational number. You all know how to multiply fractions. The only thing that's going to be a little bit different today is we're going to be throwing some positives and negatives in there. So you have to remember the rules for multiplying positive and negative numbers. So what were they? Multiplying positives and negatives or integers is like signs were positive, unlike signs were negative. All right, so we're just going to multiply like normal and then follow our rules for positives and negatives. All right, so this first one is 2/5 times 5/8. Okay, just as a quick reminder to you how to divide fractions. First off, this is a positive times a positive, so I know my answer is just going to be positive. This is like you've always done. Remember, when you're dividing fractions, you can cancel out. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. And then we just multiply across. 1/4. Okay, remember how I told you this stuff is never going away. As long as you're taking a math class, and even in life, fractions are never going away. So you might as well learn to deal with them. Okay? So that's pretty easy, just as a reminder on how to multiply fractions. All right, now look at this one. A negative 1/4 times a positive 2/7. Now, it may be easier for you just to say, okay, I've got a negative times a positive, so I know my answer is going to be negative. And then you don't have to think about it. Put that negative sign there, and you don't have to think about it anymore. You can work it just like normal. Is there any canceling I can do? Yes, 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. Multiply straight across. Negative 1 over 2 times 7 is 14. So I get a negative 1 over 14. And again, we talked about this, but let's make sure you remember. I can write that as negative 1 over 14. I can write it as 1 over negative 14. Or I can put the negative out in front like that. It doesn't really matter. Okay, that's all the same thing. Doesn't matter where you put that negative because it's all division, and it's all going to be wherever you put it, a positive or a negative divided by the opposite sign. So it's the same. It's all negative. All right, do another one. 1 1/2 times 3 2/3. Again, this is just a positive times a positive. We know what to do with that. It's going to be a positive. But let's remember, what do you do when you're multiplying mixed numbers? You've got to, do I have to get a common denominator? No. Remember, when I'm multiplying, I'm just going to MA them and then just multiply across. I don't have to have a common denominator when I'm multiplying. So 2 times, I'm going to multiply and add. Now let me back up. 2 times 1 is 2, plus 1 is 3, so that's 3 over 2, times 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11. Keep my same denominator. Is there any canceling I can do? Yes, my 3's cancel out, leaving me with 1's, and then I just multiply across. 11 over 2. What kind of fraction is that? That is improper, so I've got to change that to a mixed number. 2 will go into 11 5 times with 1 left over. So my answer is 5.5. Again, if I confused you doing that in my head, remember you can always come down here and work it out. 2 went into 11 5 times with 1 left over, so I get 5.5. I am fine if you still want to work it out down here. In fact, if you feel better on a test, definitely do it that way. It's not worth missing one on a test just to try to do it in your head. All right, what about this one? 6 over 14. 6 over 14 times a negative 21 over 40. Again, I'd look at this and say I got a positive times a negative, so I know my answer is negative. I put my negative sign there, then I don't have to think about it anymore. I can just work the problem. All right, so let's do some canceling. I can take a 7 out of the 14 and the 21, right? 14 divided by 7 is 2. 21 divided by 7 is 3. I can take a 2 out of both of those, right? 6 divided by 2 is 3. 40 divided by 2 is 20. And then I can just multiply across negative 9 over 40. And so that would be choice B, a negative 9 over 40. Again, if you don't see all your canceling, that's fine. You just have to reduce it when you get down to the end. Okay? All right, what about this one? 2 and 2/7 times 3 and 1/4. A positive times a positive, so I know my answer is going to be positive. All right, so we got to MA it. 7 times 2 is 14, plus 2 is 16, so that's going to be 16/7 times 4 times 3 is 12, plus 1 is 13 over 4. Is there any canceling I can do? Well, yeah, I can take a 2 out of the 16 and the 4, right? 4 divided by 2 is 2, or actually I could take a 4 out of them, couldn't I? Excuse me. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 16 divided by 4 is 4. And then I'm just going to multiply across. 13 times 4. Can't do that in your head. Just come down here and multiply it. That's 52 over 7. Okay? 7 will go into 52 how many times? 7 times, because 7 times 7 is 49, with 3 left over. So it's going to be choice D. Again, remember, if this 52 over 7 you can't do in your head, don't stress over that. Just write it down here and do it. Like this. There you go. 7 and 3/7. I'd much rather you get it right than do it in your head and get it wrong. So 7 and 3/7. All right. Evaluate the rational expression using multiplication. 2/3 xy. Well, what does that mean when the 2/3 and the x and the y are all written next to each other? That means to multiply. So basically I've got 2/3 times a negative 3/4 times a negative 1/2. Now you can approach this problem several different ways. You can do it a step at a time and take like 2/3 times a negative 3/4. Okay? Or you can do some canceling and cancel a whole bunch of stuff out all at one time. Let's do it both ways so you can see how that'll work. So if I come over here and I just take it a step at a time and I take 2/3 times a negative 3/4. Well, first thing, I have a positive times a negative, so I know my answer is going to be negative. I'm going to do some canceling here. 1, 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. So I get a negative 1/2. So I have a negative 1/2 times a negative 1/2. I know because it's a negative times a negative, my answer is going to be positive. So I'm going to get a positive 1/4. Okay? That's one way of doing the problem. Let me show you another way. Now, some of you may like doing it over there step by step, and that's fine. You do the way that works best for you, that makes sense to you. But let me show you what you can do when you're doing these fractions. I can come over here and I can say, first off, we talked about this and when we were multiplying integers. If I have an even number of negatives, my answer is positive. If I have an odd number, my answer is going to be negative. In this case, I have 2 negatives, which is even. So my answer is going to be positive. Okay? Now I can just cancel. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. I can multiply straight across. 1 times 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 1/4 is my answer. So either way, you get the same answer. Just do the way that works for you. Okay? One last one here. One more after this one. Here we go. 3/8 mn. Again, that means to multiply. So that's 3/8 times a negative 5/12 times a negative 2/3. Again, I'm going to do it just like we did the second time and just multiply them all together and do some canceling. I've got 2 negatives. I have an even number of negatives, so I know my answer is going to be positive. Now, I'm going to do it this way because I want to show you something. I can cancel this 3 and this 3. They're not right next to each other, but I can still cancel them because one's on the top, one's on the bottom. That's your only requirement, is that they have a common factor that you can divide them both by, and one number's on the top and one number's on the bottom. So 3 divided by 3 is 3, 3 divided by 3 is 3. is 1, excuse me. 3 divided by 3 is 1, not 3. All right, I can take a 2 out of the 2 and the 8. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 8 divided by 2 is 4. I can take a 3 out of the 15 and the 12. Yeah, they're right on top. That's not a 15, that's supposed to be a 5. So let me redo that. I'm glad I spotted that. Erase that. Make that a negative 5. Now I can't cancel that, so that'll make that not such big numbers to multiply with. All right, so now I'm just going to, I already said my answer is going to be positive. But if you didn't do that to begin with, you could think, okay, 1 times negative 5 is negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 1 is positive 5. Or you can just already know your answer is going to be positive and multiply across. And then 4 times 12 is 48. So I have a positive 5 over 48, which is choice A. Okay, choice A. All right, one last problem. Here we go. Melissa is buying a sweater originally, there is no Y on that originally priced for $81. The sweater is discounted by 2/3. Find the amount of the discount. Okay, so what are we going to do on that? You're going to be, how would you find that? I've got to multiply. I got to say, what is 2/3 of, because remember in math, the word of means to multiply. So what is 2/3 of 81? Now, how can I write 81 as a fraction? It is just 81 over 1. Excuse me. And then you can look to see, is there any canceling I can do? Well, I'm thinking I can divide 3 and 81 divided by both by 3. How did I know that? I went back to my divisibility rules. What was my divisibility rule for 3? If the sum of the digits was divisible by 3, and 81 add up to 9, which is divisible by 3, so 81 must be divisible by 3. So let's come down here and divide it. 81 divided by 3. 3 will go into 8 2 times. And that 3 will go into 21 7 times. So let's do some canceling here. 1. 3 divided by 3 is 1. 81 divided by 3 is 27. And then I'm just going to multiply across. 1 times 1 is 1. And then 27 times 2, you maybe can do that in your head, but if not, write it down, is 54. So the amount of the discount is $54, or choice B. Okay? It's a big discount on the sweater. All right, but that's multiplying by rational numbers with positives and negatives. Again, it's no different. You just got to remember your rules for multiplying fractions as well as your rules for multiplying positive and negative numbers and putting it all together. All right, have a good night. See you in the morning.